shall we say, a new original voice and in the full of her ripeness. So the lady's name is Kate O'Shea, and Kate O'Shea lives in Dublin. Her first published work was a short story, and for this she won the Prudential Young Writers Award 1990. She was involved in the Dublin Writers' Workshop in the early years of its inception, and after that went on to found Chocolate Sundays at the Cab with William Kennedy and Christopher Dana. She was winner of the Gerard Manley Hopkins Poetry Award in 1991. She won the overall prize for poetry in 1998 Clothesline Writers Festival, and also took second place and was highly recommended. She's been published in Icarus, Acorn, The Letter Acorn, Poetry Ireland Review, The Burning Butch Goldrick, Repop, Poetry on the Lake, Silver Wyvern Anthology Italy, and Poetry.com. In December 2001, she edited and published posthumously selected poems of her friend Christopher Dana. The Man with the Crowded Eye was launched in the New Theatre in Essex Street, and is described in one review as one of those rare books of pure quality. It is also a tribute to Kate O'Shea's sheer doggedness and persistence and her vision when nobody else wanted to know. The proceeds from the sale of this book go to charity. In 2001, two of her poems were highly commended by Al Alvarez and published in the Silver Wyvern Anthology in Italy. She is best known for her performances and is most recently read in New York. She's alive, she's real, she's electric, and she's here. Please welcome Kate O'Shea.
First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for giving up sacrificing their lunchtime in order to fatten their minds. I'm not used to reading with a mic, as most people know me. I usually used to read in dodgy venues like pubs and sort of dark, subterranean places. So this mic, if I start shouting, just kind of go like that and I'll get the hint. Okay, I just want to do some of this. Okay, I'm going to start off with one of my new poems, and it's called The Great Invalid. I am forever in your death, a cast of angry, lonely ghosts. So much in life to regret, I will be the one who boasts. There are stories to be told, the drama of the page and stage. I know Rimbaud and I am sold, resplendent in my female rage. And if I do not understand, I am intuitive, not an analyst. There is a pall across this land that suits the somnambulist. If nothing, I will be myself, quite consciously upon the shelf. The next poem to follow that one up is a poem that I used to read a few years ago in my cab called Self-Portrait, and it was basically to explain this rage or this violence that goes through all my work. And some people like it, so they never complain. Self-Portrait. She flew flamingo from the page, all pink and crooked and scarlet, cavorting on her makeshift stage, enlarging her words with crinoline. She knew all about ember days, and had an electrocardiograph installed in her pen to pulsate her poems. She chanced her arm with nouns and adjectives, leaning towards lecherous verbs. She craved for a messianic task, but hadn't the equipment. So she settled for a mercurial lover, a thermometer, but he exploded like the pregnant words in her head. In memoriam, house, door, roof, window, floor. From that, I'd like to go on to a poem that was published recently in the Silver Wyvern Anthology in Italy. Hang on, there goes everything. All right. This is Parable of a Polish Emigre. And I wrote this poem because my mother's side of the family were originally Polish Jews, and they came here during the 1800s. And you hear a lot in Ireland about people going to America or emigrating, and you know, I mean, just because you're Irish, it sort of cloaks you in this authenticity that you're immediately allowed to scribble, or you can scribble. So I thought, what about all the people who emigrated to Ireland, and basically their language was stopped and they had to change religion or their names were changed. Parable of a Polish emigre. We came from Jews from everywhere and nowhere, the accumulated and single. A Polish woman with a bouquet of flames in her breast, she throws me embers. My mother remembers her like stories from the lives of saints, St. Martin, the Little Flower, St. Bernadette, and told me how she came and married in the West. But they had changed her name before that because their tongue was best. 4 generations on, I have learned to kiss the corners of zeros and be satisfied with geisha shapes that have no center. It is a sin to worship the monster's jaw, a caterpillar spinning on a thread to be born again without flaw. The Polish woman said, "You can't abandon me now that I am dead. I must go home. I have lived in white cities with stones and birds, tall people and donkeys. Let me drink my reflection from the stoop of melancholy. I walk there to hear the voice, 'Do you love me?' What could I say on the shores of a dead sea? The waves lap, note a lapse. Love me, love me, love me. After many years, a few are remembered. The madman, the suicide, the bastard. In the warm belly, a child rotates like the universe. This is my brother, and all atoms swell for the uncreated world, which is perfect and useless." I'm going to follow that on with 2 recent poems, both untitled, about the same sort of thing. My upbringing was very odd. At 5, I was living with my grandmother, and my mother, very religious lady, practiced Catholicism with sort of a Jewish slant, which was very confusing, particularly around Christmas. And you get asked weird things by kids, and you kind of go, "Oh, just my mother's daft," you know. So it's also about Irish. My father was educated through Irish, and I was never good at maths, and the only way he could teach me was through Gaelic. Now people rarely say Gaelic, it's Irish. And it's basically about the relationship between, you know, your parents, where you come from, who you are, and coming to terms with who you are, that you actually do fit in. Why do you call after me? I don't want to know about you and what happened more than 100 years ago. It doesn't concern me. I wasn't there. I don't care. You are alien to me. It took place long before the Holocaust, pogrom, Jew. What am I supposed to do? I am lost, and you, Pole, fill my head with dead people. You are dead too. Stay dead. I don't want to know about you and your existence, woman. Nowadays it's the thing to do. Ball on the streets, Jew, Jew. I feel uneasy thinking about you, but write poems people want to hear about mice and pigs. How can I measure emotion in art? I am ashamed to hide you in my heart, muse, witch. It is time you went home to your white city. I am well fed and healthy, some say pretty. When I was a child, I didn't appreciate the significance of a plain woman in a photograph whose head was half-cocked as she answered back. When I am underwater, I dare not open my eyes. So strong my fear of drowning and seeing dead ancestors rise to greet me. Fishermen with gnarled paws who knew the Atlantic Sea, men who died long ago and spoke a different tongue to me, a reminder of who I am and how far I have come to the water's edge. A trembling dream of silence, gasping directly into a howling wind. My own Babylon, and people who have dumbed by language. The Polish blood in me, blotted on the page. The forced alteration of a name, a fair trade. The Irish tongue, severed, rolled out and displayed as a massive hurt. Shoved down my slender throat from an early age, so that I almost choked with rage. I dare not open my eyes. What would I say to ghosts? The gestures are the same. Why do we repeat them? How could I begin to greet them? Now, I think often say, like, what kind of poetry do you write? What are your themes? And I never know what to say to them. I kind of look at them blankly and think, what a daft question. Because there's no one specific theme. I mean, it's love, death, whatever, you know. I have just a very sensational interest in ordinary life. And this poem is about a woman who used to live in the same house as me. It's called A Vodka Factory in the Ukraine. Mary lives in the bedsit downstairs and has shares in a vodka factory somewhere deep in the Ukraine. She swears by the stuff, but can never pronounce the name. What a shame. I've heard she arrives to work drunk, and the last place she lived in she did a bunk because they cut off her phone. But she'll get it back again, using a false name. She doesn't like to be alone. The greasy man in the chip shop made a pass, put his hand up her skirt and grabbed a cheek of her ass. She hasn't lost it, and that's the truth. The filthy, dirty, swaggering brute. Cocksure he doesn't own a suit. Beneath her, bet that's where he'd like to be. More vodka, feck tea. Mary lives in a bedsit downstairs. She likes fresh flowers and says prayers to a God she's not even certain exists. But that's the trouble with being pissed. God, he's not really missed, except on those occasions when the workers strike in the Ukraine. Then the loss of her favourite vodka is enough to drive her insane. A tonic is always close at hand. She'll totter to the off-licence and invest in another brand. Now, the next poem I would like to do is also one of those old sort of bawdy poems that I used to read in pubs that people got a great kick out of. It was just sort of to break the tedium between death and sort of unrequited love and that kind of thing. And it seemed like the thing to do after a few pints or whatever. So she kissed a masochist in the great vein of tabloid press. Last night she kissed a masochist. It seemed the psychoanalytical thing to do, considering that he held a sledgehammer and begged her to hit him in the kangaroo, but she couldn't press the psychological moment. This morning she suffered slight concussion, the bump in her head being smaller than the bump in her belly, which mattered over mind 9 months later. And with that, I'm going to go on to another, as I call them, pub poems. This one is Bottle Blonde, and it's in 4 acts. And there'll have to be some sort of suspension of disbelief involved in this one. So, Bottle Blonde. Act 1, scene a Dublin pub. A crinkled man with breasts chews cigarette, sags into tired glass. He cries because the blonde who drank his drink all night went staggering. She left no address, only lipstick, lip service, that eventual patronizing kiss. Not drunk enough. Act 2, scene, the quayside. Lovely Liffey turns her head, he endeavours to touch her hair. She is tired and desired, broken bottles are her spine. He cuts himself in despair. Act 3, scene, a coop. Homer Pigeon finds his coop, then reassumes creative stoop, ascends musical stairs unlit, gropes banisters, walls smeared with shit. An electric light bulb, bold and dim, illuminates him. Sluggers tea, chomps heel of bread with cheese, then farts. Fed at ease. Opens paper, reads, I'm glad it's over. Act 4, scene a Dublin street. Neon on wet faces, his crony eyeballs glowing, embellishes, her roots were showing. Now, the next one I would like to do is my father's shirt. My father is, I call him the 1950s generation. He wanted to do so much more with his life, but he wasn't sort of allowed. He got a scholarship to go study at the Royal Academy of Music, but my grandfather said that was just for ponces and gays, so he handed him a shovel and said that should do you for now. But he still plays music, and he's always told me to go and do what you want to do and never mind anybody else. And begrudges, and that's it. So this poem is called My Father's Shirt, and it's about me one day when I was ironing my father's shirt, and I just began thinking that this is the shirt that my little chubby dad wears when he goes out to face the world. My father's shirt is square and triangular, and speaks the solemn vernacular of a generation stunted by corporal punishment, Latin grammar and Gaelic. In a slaughter of sunlight, it is inoffensive and detergent white, swollen in the wind like a sail, but pegged, going nowhere. My father's shirt is vulnerable and flat on the ironing board. Almost inarticulate, it yaps in trisyllables. Permanent and pensionable, polycotton, enrobed with iridescence, but incapable of dreams. To follow that on, the next poem is called Study of Log. Log was a Celtic god, a sort of god of all gods, if you like. And in this one, I'm comparing my father to Log. He was born with a hole in his head, but so were the majority of his generation, and this gave way to that veneration of the dead and civil service. Yet I never think of him without smiling, standing defenceless, his arms flung apart. He was acquainted with birds and smart in soft slippers. One hand was a nest, the other a hard acorn, but he was not comic. With a view of a dunghill, a rat hole, a dog, an ass, a pig. I held his dry fingers like a douser's twig, and shook a bit when I found no human thing. His soul accomplished immobility, having been without air too long, so that his feet bled when he tore them from the clay, and overnight his hair turned grey.